Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the deep dive. If you ever feel just buried under the sheer amount of global news hitting us every day, well, you're definitely in the right place.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It really is. So what we do here is take that huge pile of reporting, everything from science, finance, tech, geopolitics, and basically filter out the noise.
We try to hand you the core stuff, the high-impact facts that really matter.
Exactly. Our mission today really is to distill this massive collection of global events, give you a comprehensive, kind of balanced view of where things stand right now.
And it's quite the agenda today, I have to say. It really sets the stage for, well, where the world seems to be headed.
Feels like we're covering everything.
We really are traversing the spectrum. I mean, from investigating the tiniest, most fundamental building blocks, these mysterious ghost particles,
Right.
all the way up to these huge global financial mechanisms trying to, fund the survival of our planet.
And everything in between tech shifts, political accountability.
Exactly. Seismic shifts happening there, too.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to kick things off at maybe the most extreme edges of knowledge, starting with physics and space.
Makes sense. I mean, what's more fundamental than asking why we even exist?
Right. Let's dive in. So, the universe itself, it's built on this just monumental mystery. Why is there matter? Like, why are we here? Our reports are detailing this ongoing puzzle, why matter completely dominates over antimatter in, the universe we're going to see.
Yeah, because the standard theory, right, suggests that back during the Big Bang, they should have been created in perfectly equal amounts.
And if that happened, poof.
Pretty much. They would have annihilated each other instantly. Yeah. Nothing left but, like, a sea of pure energy.
Yet here we are, galaxies, planets, us.
Precisely. And this fundamental asymmetry, it's arguably the biggest unsolved problem in particle physics.
Okay.
And the key might just lie with these incredibly elusive particles. Neutrinos.
The ghost particles.
Yeah.
I heard that term.
Yeah, we call them that because they barely interact with anything. Billions are passing through you right now, totally unnoticed.
Wild.
So the scientific goal, the big aim, is to study how these neutrinos behave. Specifically, they're hunting for something called a violation of CP symmetry.
Okay, CP symmetry. That sounds complex. Can we break that down a bit? What's the core idea we're looking to violate?
Think of it like the universe holding up a mirror. CP symmetry basically assumes that if you look at a particle doing something, and then you look at its antiparticle twin doing the exact same thing, everything should look and behave identically.
A perfect reflection.
Exactly. If you swap a particle for its antiparticle, that's charge conjugation, the C, and then you flip its spatial coordinates, like looking in a mirror that's parity, the basic laws of physics should stay the same.
Should being the key word.
Right. But, and this is the crucial bit, if we find that neutrinos and their antimatter counterparts, antineutrinos, actually oscillate, meaning they change their flavor, electron, muon, or tau, if they do that differently.
Then the mirror is cracked.
Precisely. It means the universe doesn't treat matter and antimatter equally after all. There's a subtle difference.
And finding that difference, that violation, gives us the kind of theoretical wiggle room needed to explain why matter actually survived the Big Bang.
That's the hope, exactly. It could explain the imbalance.
And the effort to find this. It's huge, right?
Oh, monumental. We're talking about massive global collaboration. A prime example is the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment, or DUNE.
Okay.
It's this enormous international physics project. You've got institutions like Fermilab in Illinois in the United States working super closely with researchers in Japan and many others worldwide.
And what are they actually doing?
They're essentially planning to shoot a high-intensity beam of neutrinos straight through the Earth, from Fermilab to a massive detector deep underground in South Dakota.
Through the Earth? Seriously?
Yep. Remember, they barely interact with anything, so the Earth itself is mostly transparent to them. It allows for a long baseline to observe those potential flavor changes.
DUNE sounds incredible, but I imagine expensive. I read that the sheer scale, billions of dollars, draws some political scrutiny.
It absolutely does. It's a massive investment.
So, is the potential payoff really worth that kind of expenditure? Or is this just so fundamental that cost becomes secondary?
Look, I'd argue this research is almost existential. in a scientific sense. If we can't figure out why CP symmetry was violated way back in the early universe,
Then we don't understand a basic rule.
we don't understand a core law of physics. And frankly, we don't fully understand why anything, stars, planets, us, exists instead of just that sea of energy. So the sheer scale and the complexity, the cost, it all just underlines how incredibly challenging it is to probe these fundamental forces that literally built our reality.
So you see it as a necessary investment in foundational knowledge, regardless of the price tag.
I think many in the physics community do, yes. It's pushing the boundaries of what we know about existence itself.
Okay, so from these invisible particles basically deciding our fate, let's zoom way out, to the really massive violent events shaping the cosmos.
Good transition.
Our reports detail a discovery that sounds truly extraordinary. Something called a tidal disruption event, a TDE. This one happened 10 billion light years away.
Yeah, and what's just staggering about this one is the sheer brightness, the magnitude of the energy release they observed.
So what is a TDE, basically?
It's what happens when an unlucky star wanders just a bit too close to a supermassive black hole, like the ones at the center of most galaxies. Yeah. Oh, it was right. The black hole's immense gravity just shreds the star, tears it apart completely.
And this event, they captured it.
They did. The Zwicky Transient Facility, which scans the sky for exactly these kinds of temporary bright events, caught the flare. And the reports say this flare was 30 times brighter than any TDE ever recorded before.
30 times. That's hard to even imagine.
It's astronomical, literally.
You know, it's rare that a technical term is so evocative, but spaghettification, it really paints a picture.
Slight chuckle, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It perfectly captures the physics involved. You have these immense tidal forces near the black hole's event horizon.
Point of no return.
Right. As the star gets close, the gravitational pull on the side nearest the black hole is just exponentially stronger than the pull on the far side.
Stretching it.
Exactly. This massive differential force stretches the star vertically while squeezing it horizontally, pulling it into this long, thin stream of gas, like a noodle, hence spaghettification.
So why was this one 30 times brighter, do we know?
Well, it's likely a combination of factors. It could be something about the star itself, or maybe the specific properties of that particular black hole, its mass, maybe its spin rate.
Or maybe we just got lucky with the view.
That's also a strong possibility. We might have had a perfect line of sight looking right down the axis of a high-velocity jet of material that got shot out during the disruption. That could focus the light and make it appear much brighter.
Okay, shifting focus, a bit closer to home, but still out there. We also have news showing some pretty advanced space observation capabilities. China's Tianwen-1 Mars probe, right, has been orbiting Mars.
That's right. It's been doing great work around the red planet.
And it managed to capture images of an interstellar comet 3II TLAS.
Yes, which is quite a feat. It really signals China's growing sophistication in, complex space operations and deep space research.
Because capturing something from outside our solar system is harder.
Significantly harder. You need incredibly precise tracking and targeting, plus advanced imaging tech, especially from a probe that's primarily focused on Mars. It shows their capabilities extend far beyond just our immediate planetary neighbors.
And what do we learn from imaging an interstellar comet like that?
Well, that data is gold dust, really. It helps us understand the composition of interstellar matter, the stuff floating around in the vast emptiness between star systems, what kind of materials, what kind of ices and dust are out there. It gives us clues about the building blocks of other star systems.
And speaking of Mars, NASA, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, they've got new plans for the red planet too, right? Focused on its atmosphere.
Correct. There's a mission specifically aimed at solving that long-standing mystery. How did Mars lose its atmosphere? It used to be much thicker, warmer, wetter.
Right. Evidence of ancient rivers and lakes.
Exactly. So NASA's launching 2 twin satellites. It's part of the ESCAPADE mission that stands for Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers.
Catchy.
Chuckles, always. These twin satellites are designed to study the planet's atmospheric dynamics in detail.
And they're hitching a ride on a new rocket.
Yeah, this is interesting too. They're scheduled to be carried aboard the upcoming maiden flight of Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket. So it's a big launch for both the mission and the launch provider.
What's the specific goal of ESCAPADE? What are they measuring?
They want to understand precisely how the solar wind, that constant stream of charged particles from the sun, interacts with Mars's upper atmosphere.
Because Mars doesn't have a global magnetic field like Earth does.
Exactly. Earth's magnetic field acts like a shield, deflecting most of the solar wind. Mars lost its global field billions of years ago, leaving its atmosphere vulnerable. So the solar wind essentially strips away atmospheric gases over time.
And understanding that process helps us figure out how Mars went from, potentially habitable to the cold, dry desert we see today.
That's the core question. It's pivotal for figuring out the long-term habitability potential of other planets we might discover. And honestly, it helps inform our models for Earth's own atmospheric evolution too. It's comparative planetology.
Okay, before we leave the realm of pure science, let's bring it back down to Earth, or at least near Earth. A couple of really surprising terrestrial applications here. First up, cosmic dust, helping track climate change.
Yeah, this is a really innovative approach. It kind of marries astrophysics with geology and climate science.
How does that work?
So scientists are analyzing the amount of cosmic dust, these microscopic particles that are constantly raining down on Earth from space. They're looking at this dust preserved in sediment layers on the Arctic Ocean floor.
And there's a climate connection.
It turns out the quantity of this specific type of cosmic dust, particularly isotopes like helium-3, which comes from space, correlates really well with historical records of sea ice cover.
How so?
During periods when there was less sea ice covering the Arctic Ocean, more of this cosmic dust could settle directly onto the ocean floor and get locked into the sediment. When the ice cover was thick and extensive, less dust made it down.
So the dust level in the sediment acts like a historical marker, a proxy, for past sea ice extent.
Exactly. It gives us another tool, a potentially very detailed one, for reconstructing past climate conditions, especially how sea ice responded to warming periods hundreds of thousands or even millions of years ago.
Which is invaluable for testing and refining our climate models, predicting future changes.
Absolutely. Understanding the past helps us predict the future with more confidence.
And then we have these incredible tiny creatures, tardigrades, water bears. They sound indestructible.
Chuckles. They are remarkably resilient, yeah. Nature's ultimate survivors, maybe.
And they have this protein, D-sub. Sounds like something out of a comic book.
It kind of does. D-sub stands for damage suppressor, is this protein found in some tardigrade species, and it's genuinely amazing.
What does it do?
It's known for its incredible ability to shield the tardigrade's DNA from damage. Damage caused by things that would obliterate most life forms, extreme radiation, like you'd find in space, and also desiccation, which is just extreme dryness.
Wow. Okay, so applications.
That's where it gets really interesting for us. Researchers are seriously looking at potential biotech applications, especially in agriculture.
Like making crops tougher.
Exactly. Imagine if you could genetically integrate the D-sub protein or mimic its function in important agricultural crops.
They could potentially become much more resilient to drought.
Precisely. Or perhaps even more resistant to other environmental stressors linked to climate change, like increased UV radiation. It could be a game changer for global food security, especially in vulnerable regions.
Making drought-resistant wheat or corn using a protein from a microscopic water bear.
It's pretty wild.
The potential's definitely there.
Yeah.
It's a great example of learning from nature's solutions.
Now, just for a moment of contrast and really to underscore the kind of rigorous science we've just been talking about, we should probably briefly mention the 21 grams theory.
Yes. Dr. McDougall's experiment, a historical footnote, really.
We're bringing this up purely to highlight the difference between that kind of thing and, say, the incredibly detailed, peer-reviewed work happening at DEM.
Absolutely. It was this early 20th century experiment, heavily publicized at the time. Dr. Duncan McDougall claimed he'd measured the weight of the human soul.
How?
He put beds with 6 terminally ill patients on industrial scales and monitored their weight right at the moment of death. He claimed to observe a sudden drop of about 3/4 of an ounce, which is roughly 21 grams.
And this was not exactly rigorous science. Not by any modern standard, no. The sample size was tiny, the measurements were crude, there was no control group, results weren't consistently replicated even in his own small set. It was deeply flawed. But it captured the public imagination.
So we mention it only to draw that sharp contrast between pseudoscience, even well-intentioned perhaps, and the meticulous evidence-based collaborative science we see today trying to answer fundamental questions.
Exactly. Modern science relies on reproducibility, statistical significance, peer review, ruling out alternative explanations. All the things McDougall's experiment lacked. It's a good reminder of the importance of critical analysis.
A perfect segue, actually. We're moving now from, let's say, the theoretical weight of souls to the very real, very measurable weight of money. money needed potentially to save the Earth.
A transition indeed. We're diving into climate finance, policy, and corporate action.
Right. The focus here was the big COP30 Belém Climate Summit held in Brazil. And a major headline was the launch of this huge new initiative, the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, or TFFF.
Yes, this is a Brazil-led initiative, a really ambitious one. The core idea is to protect the world's vital rainforests by empowering the countries in the global south where these forests actually are.
Empowering them how? Through funding.
Primarily, yes. The TFFF is designed to be a massive fund. The targets are colossal. They're aiming for $25 billion from public sources, governments, development banks, and another $100 billion from private investors eventually.
$125 billion. That's staggering.
It is. And the structure is key here. It's not just aid handouts. The plan is for the fund to make results-based payments. Meaning tropical nations get rewarded financially after they demonstrate real, verifiable reductions in deforestation. So the incentive is directly tied to achieving measurable conservation outcomes.
That sounds like a shift from maybe less transparent aid programs of the past.
That's the intention.
Yeah.
Put the financial power and the incentive squarely on effective, verifiable forest protection.
But raising that kind of money, that's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And there are already some concerns about how they plan to manage it. The World Bank is involved.
The World Bank is acting as the interim host and trustee, which gives it some institutional backing. But yeah, the strategy for raising and managing the funds has definitely drawn some scrutiny.
What's the main concern?
One point critics are raising involves the facility's plan to invest some of its capital. Part of the idea is to invest in things like emerging market bonds to generate returns to help sustain the fund over the long term.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Maybe.
Well, the potential upside is higher returns, but the downside is risk. Emerging market bonds can be volatile. Critics argue that a facility designed for long-term conservation, protecting forests for decades, forever even, according to the name, should prioritize stability and capital preservation over chasing higher but riskier returns.
Because if those investments sour during a market downturn.
Exactly. The capital needed for those reliable long-term payments to countries protecting their forests could be jeopardized. It potentially undermines the core mission of providing dependable funding.
And the first big chunk of money pledged came from Norway, right?
Yeah.
They're always a major player in climate finance.
They are. Norway stepped up with a very significant pledge. $3 billion.
So there's strings attached.
Jade strings. Crucially, this $3 billion is structured as loans spread over a decade, and Norway put some strict conditions on it.
Okay, what are they?
First, Norway is capping its own participation at 20% of the total public fund target. So their $3 billion is only part of the needed $25 billion.
Right.
But the really critical condition is this. Norway mandated that at least $9.8 billion must be raised from other donors, other governments, other institutions by the year 2026.
So basically, Norway's money is conditional on other wealthy nations stepping up too.
And soon. Precisely. It's the real pressure point here. We have seen other pledges start to come. In Brazil itself committed $1 billion. Indonesia said they'd match $1 billion. Colombia, the Netherlands, Portugal have made commitments.
But hitting that $9.8 billion target from others by 2026, that's the challenge Norway has laid down.
Absolutely. It's essentially Norway saying to the rest of the developed world, show us you're serious about this. Put your money where your mouth is by 2026, or our full commitment might not materialize. It forces collective action or risks stalling the whole thing.
Now, the situation gets even more complex when you look at the host country, Brazil, and its president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. There seem to be contradictions.
You could definitely say that. Lula is playing this almost impossible dual role.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, he's positioning himself and Brazil as this global environmental champion. He hosted COP30. He's spearheading the TFFF. He's promoting forest conservation as a critical climate solution, especially for the global south.
Called the Green Champion.
But on the other hand, his government is simultaneously pushing forward with plans for new oil and gas drilling projects. And some of these are in environmentally sensitive areas, including potentially near the mouth of the Amazon River.
Oil drilling in the Amazon region while championing forest protection. That sounds tricky to reconcile.
It highlights the immense tension that many nations, especially resource-rich developing nations, face. You have the urgent need for environmental protection versus powerful, immediate economic interests and the continued global reliance on fossil fuel revenues.
It's a balancing act that seems almost designed to fail.
Environmental groups certainly see it as a deep hypocrisy. They argue you can't credibly lead on climate while expanding fossil fuel exploration, especially in such a critical ecosystem. It definitely complicates Brazil's climate leadership narrative.
And it seems the climate summit wasn't just about financing contradictions, but also some pretty pointed geopolitical criticism aimed across the Atlantic.
Oh, absolutely. The atmosphere at COP30 was highly charged in that respect, too. Several world leaders took very direct aim at the current U.S. President, Donald Trump.
For what specifically?
Primarily for what they described as climate inaction and his history of skepticism towards climate change science. They framed his administration's policies, particularly withdrawing from or weakening climate agreements, as a major roadblock.
Any specific examples?
Colombian President Gustavo Petro was particularly outspoken. He criticized President Trump in very strong, frankly quite inflammatory terms, accusing him of being against mankind and making some controversial comparisons regarding his political rhetoric.
Wow. Strong words on an international stage.
Extremely strong. And strategically deployed, you could argue. This kind of criticism serves a purpose for these leaders.
Which is?
It acts as a powerful rallying cry. It allows them to emphasize the urgency of global cooperation, adherence to agreements like the Paris Accord, and frame any non-participation, especially by a major power like the U.S., as a fundamental threat to the planet.
So it's using criticism of one leader to try and galvanize broader international commitment.
That seems to be the dynamic. It leverages global public opinion and diplomatic pressure to push for renewed multilateral efforts, essentially saying we must unite against this kind of approach.
Whether you agree with the specific language or the tactic, it really underscores how deeply climate politics is now intertwined with national leadership, ideology, and global power dynamics.
Absolutely. It's inseparable now.
Yeah.
And moving from government policy and politics to the corporate world, we're seeing some significant action there too, especially from big tech companies focusing on environmental initiatives.
Yeah, specifically tackling reforestation and carbon removal, right? Particularly in the Amazon.
Exactly. This is a notable push towards what are called nature-based solutions for climate change.
And Google made a big commitment.
Yes, Google announced a major commitment to purchase carbon removal credits. These credits will come from a large-scale reforestation project in the Brazilian Amazon.
And they're not alone in this.
No, this project is being facilitated by something called the Symbiosis Coalition, and its members include other tech giants like Meta, Facebook's parent company, and Microsoft.
So the biggest names in tech are banding together for this.
They are. The coalition's goal is ambitious. They aim to help bring up to 20 million tons of high-quality carbon removal credits to the market.
Where are these credits actually coming from? Who's doing the reforestation?
The credits are being supplied by a Brazilian startup called Momback. They specialize in these large-scale reforestation projects designed specifically to capture carbon and restore biodiversity.
Okay, you mentioned high quality and verified credits. That seems important. What does verified really mean in this context? Because carbon credits have sometimes had a, let's say, questionable reputation.
That's a crucial point. Verification is absolutely key here, and it's what differentiates potentially impactful projects from, well, greenwashing.
Right.
In this case, the credits supplied by Momback are expected to adhere to very stringent international standards and methodologies. This means independent auditors will verify that the trees are actually planted, that they survive, that the amount of carbon they absorb is accurately measured, and that the project provides genuine biodiversity benefits and doesn't harm local communities.
So it's not just paying someone to not cut down trees that maybe weren't going to be cut down anyway.
Exactly. It has to represent additional carbon removal that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And the verification ensures transparency and accountability.
And why are companies like Google, Meta, and Microsoft doing this? Is it just PR or something more?
It's likely a mix of factors. There's definitely a reputational benefit, but there's also growing pressure from investors, employees, and customers for these incredibly wealthy and resource-intensive companies to take tangible action on climate change.
And offsetting their own massive carbon footprints.
That's a big part of it. Data centers, manufacturing, their operations are energy hungry. But this initiative also signals a broader recognition, perhaps, within these high-value industries that they need to move beyond just simple offsetting. They need to actively invest in credible, scientifically sound, nature-based solutions if they're serious about achieving long-term net zero goals. It represents a significant corporate push into the carbon removal market.
Speaking of high-value industries and enormous sums of money, we absolutely have to talk about the pinnacle of corporate wealth and compensation right now. That's the shareholder approval of Elon Musk's pay package at Tesla. The number's just staggering.
It truly is. We're talking about a compensation package potentially worth up to $56 billion, depending on stock performance, although some reports use figures stretching towards $1 trillion based on potential future market cap milestones outlined in the original plan. Whatever the exact figure, it's astronomical.
And Tesla shareholders just voted to approve this. Again.
Yes, they reapproved the 2018 pay package. This is significant because the deal had actually been voided by a court earlier this year.
Right, I remember that. A judge in Delaware, where Tesla is incorporated, struck it down. Why?
The judge ruled that the Tesla board, when it originally approved the deal in 2018, hadn't adequately proving that the process was fair to all shareholders. There were concerns about the board's independence from Musk and whether the negotiation process was robust enough. Essentially, the court felt the board didn't fully represent the interests of minority shareholders.
So this new shareholder vote is basically Tesla and Musk challenging that court ruling directly.
Pretty much. They moved to reincorporate Tesla in Texas and then put the pay package back up for a shareholder vote, presumably to demonstrate overwhelming shareholder support and counter the Delaware court's objections.
What does this mean for corporate governance, for how companies are run and how executives are paid?
It creates this fascinating and potentially worrying friction between shareholder democracy and judicial oversight. While the shareholders have now reaffirmed their support, lightly swayed by Musk's incredible track record of value creation for Tesla up to that point, the whole controversy raises deep questions. Like, what are the real checks and balances on executive power, especially when you have a CEO with such a dominant personality and massive public following? Musk himself didn't help matters by labeling some institutional investors who opposed the deal as corporate terrorists.
Yeah, that language was intense.
It reflects a potential shift. If a charismatic leader can secure this level of compensation, even after a court voided it, and even amidst recent concerns about Tesla's sales performance and competition, well, it raises serious questions.
About CEOP standards everywhere.
Exactly. Does this set a new precedent? What does it mean for protecting the interests of smaller shareholders who might disagree but whose votes are overwhelmed? It's a major test case for who really controls the destiny and the treasury of these incredibly high-value, often founder-led firms.
And that level of value, that scale, leads us directly into the next major tech story. The absolutely enormous infrastructure demands being created by the artificial intelligence boom.
Yes, the sheer energy and financial scale required to power the AI revolution is becoming increasingly clear, and it's astronomical.
Let's start with the money. OpenAI, for example. They're a major player.
A huge player. Our reports highlight their financial trajectory. OpenAI is reportedly running at approximately $20 billion in annual recurring revenue, or ARR.
$20 billion a year. Just from subscriptions and contracts.
Roughly, yes. That's the expected revenue baseline over the next 12 months, which is already massive for a relatively young company.
But that's just their revenue. What about the cost of actually doing the AI? The infrastructure needed?
That's where the numbers become truly mind-boggling. The headline figure floating around linked to ambitions from companies like OpenAI and their partners is an estimated investment commitment of around $1.4 trillion.
$1.4 trillion. Towards what exactly?
Towards massively enhancing global data center capacity, building new centers, upgrading existing ones, filling them with incredibly powerful, specialized chips needed for training and running these large AI models.
And the electricity needed to power all that.
That's the other side of the coin. This kind of infrastructure push is estimated to require something in the order of 30 gigawatts of additional electrical capacity.
30 gigawatts? Can you put that number in perspective? How much power is that?
It's huge. 30 gigawatts is more than the entire installed power generation capacity of many developed countries. Think of nations like Finland or Ireland. AI's growth is demanding more power than their whole grid provides today.
So AI isn't just using up spare electricity capacity. It's actively competing for power.
It's becoming a major new source of demand, competing directly with traditional industrial sectors and even residential consumers for electricity. It's driving the need for significant new power generation.
Can we contextualize that energy impact even further? What are the projections looking like?
The International Energy Agency, the IEA, put out estimates recently. They project that global electricity consumption just from data centers, which includes AI, cloud computing, crypto mining, etc., is already on track to potentially double by the year 2026.
Double in just a couple of years.
That's the projection. This kind of explosive growth in demand puts massive, sustained pressure on electricity grids around the world.
Which means?
It means needing to build vast new power generation facilities, renewables hopefully, but potentially fossil fuels too, depending on the region and the speed needed. It can strain local grids, potentially leading to higher electricity prices for everyone, and it complicates global efforts towards decarbonization if not managed carefully.
So the AI boom isn't just a tech story or a finance story.
Not at all. It's fundamentally an energy story and a resource story, with potentially massive implications for global economic stability, infrastructure development, and our climate goals.
And we're already seeing the ripple effects of this AI infrastructure demand in other markets, right? Specifically hitting supply chains for computer components.
Absolutely. There's a very direct, measurable impact happening right now, particularly visible in places like China's electronics wholesale markets.
What are they seeing?
Take the Wakambei market in Shenzhen, China. It's like a global barometer for electronics components. Reports from there show dramatic price surges for memory chips, specifically DRAM, that's dynamic random access memory, the kind used in most computers and smartphones.
How big a surge?
In some cases, prices for certain types of DRAM were up by over 171% compared to the previous year.
Wow, 171%. What's driving that? Is it just general inflation?
Not primarily. The root cause links directly back to the AI demand we were just talking about.
How so?
Because the major chip manufacturers, the Samsungs, the SK Hynixes, the Microns, are prioritizing their production lines and their supply chains to meet the insatiable demand for the specialized high-capacity, high-bandwidth memory chips needed for AI servers.
Things like HBM, high bandwidth memory.
Exactly. HBM is crucial for training and running those massive AI models efficiently. It's where the big money and the urgent demand are right now. So manufacturers are dedicating more of their production capacity to HBM and other high-end server memory.
And that means less capacity for the regular stuff.
Precisely. It squeezes the availability of the more conventional, lower-capacity DRAM chips needed for standard consumer electronics, your laptop, your phone, even simpler smart home devices.
So the AI industry's hunger for high-end memory is basically starving the consumer market, driving up prices for everyday gadgets.
That's a fair way to put it. Reduced supply plus steady demand equals higher prices. It demonstrates very clearly how these specialized trillion-dollar needs of the AI sector can ripple down and directly affect the cost of the technology you and I use every single day.
Okay, and just to round out this section on tech and markets, a quick snapshot of the broader financial markets. Things seem a bit cautious.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of caution, maybe even anxiety, in the air on Wall Street. We saw both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the tech-heavy NASDAQ index dip recently.
What's driving that volatility?
It seems to be a combination of factors. There are ongoing concerns about whether the valuations of some key tech stocks, especially those benefiting hugely from the AI hype, have gotten too high too fast.
A potential bubble.
Investors are certainly wary of that possibility. Plus, the controversy surrounding the Tesla pay package vote didn't exactly soothe nerves about corporate governance and stability in some of these major companies.
And broader economic worries.
Yes, always. Lingering concerns about inflation, what central banks might do with interest rates next, the overall global economic outlook, it all feeds into investor sentiment. So right now, the market seems to be navigating this very precarious landscape, balancing the enormous potential upside from technologies like AI against the inherent risks of market concentration, high valuations, and economic uncertainty.
All right, let's shift gears now. Moving into part 4. Geopolitical volatility and some really critical social issues that have been in the news.
Okay.
Starting with global flashpoints. We continue to see persistent security challenges, particularly along that very volatile border between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Yes, the situation there remains incredibly tense. Recently, we saw it escalate again, quite worryingly.
What happened?
There was an exchange of gunfire between Pakistani and Afghan forces near the border. This happened even as ceasefire negotiations were supposedly trying to get underway in Istanbul, Turkey.
Where exactly did the firing occur?
Reports pinpointed it near Spin Boldak, which is in Afghanistan's Kandahar province, right across from the Shaman border crossing in Pakistan.
What's the underlying tension here? It seems chronic.
It is. Pakistan has long accused the Afghan Taliban government of harboring militants from the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP. The TTP is a separate group, but allied with the Afghan Taliban, and they've carried out numerous deadly attacks inside Pakistan.
And Afghanistan denies this.
They strongly deny providing sanctuary or support to the TTP. This fundamental disagreement, this cycle of accusation and denial, fuels the mistrust and periodic violence along the border.
And what are the immediate consequences when things flare up like this?
Well, the renewed fighting led to the closure of critical border crossings again, like Tianwen's been Boldak.
Which impacts?
It severely hampers vital trade between the two countries. But more critically, it interrupts humanitarian access and strands ordinary civilians who rely on crossing the border for work, family, or accessing basic necessities. It just prevents any real stabilization in a strategically vital and very troubled region.
Meanwhile, in another crisis zone, Gaza, the provision of humanitarian aid seems to remain incredibly difficult, even with a ceasefire supposedly in place.
That's tragically true. According to reports from the United Nations, the UN Israeli authorities have rejected a very large number of requests to bring essential relief materials into the Gaza Strip since the latest ceasefire began, which was nearly a month ago now.
How many requests are we talking about?
The UN stated that over 100 requests for aid convoys or essential supplies had been denied entry during that period.
Denied on what grounds?
A significant number of these rejections, according to the UN, were because items on the aid trucks were classified by Israeli authorities under the controversial dual-use designation.
Okay, we need to understand what dual use means in this context, especially when we're talking about humanitarian aid for a population in desperate need.
Right. So technically, dual use refers to items that have a legitimate civilian purpose but could potentially be diverted or modified for military use.
Examples.
Usually this applies to things like certain types of advanced communication equipment, specific chemicals, maybe some construction materials like durable metals or concrete.
Things that could conceivably be used to build weapons or fortifications?
Correct. However, the controversy arises because, according to UN agencies and humanitarian groups on the ground, this definition is being applied far too broadly in Gaza right now.
To what kind of items?
They report rejections for things like blankets, winter clothing, water pipes and sanitation supplies, medical equipment, and even solar panels.
Solar panels, how are they dual use?
The justification might be that components within the solar panels or the batteries needed to store the power could theoretically be repurposed for military electronics. But the immediate overwhelming need is for those panels to power critical civilian infrastructure like hospitals, water pumps, or bakeries, especially with the electricity network devastated.
So this broad application of dual use is effectively blocking essential life-saving aid from getting in.
That's precisely the argument humanitarian agencies are making. They say it severely hampers their ability to help hundreds of thousands of desperate families, especially as they face harsh conditions, lack of clean water, and collapsing health services. It's a major point of contention in the post-ceasefire environment.
And turning now to Africa, specifically the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, reports paint a picture of a truly devastating and escalating hunger crisis.
The humanitarian situation in the DRC, particularly in the eastern provinces, is absolutely dire. Current estimates indicate that nearly 25 million people are facing severe food insecurity. That's a staggering number.
25 million. What's driving this crisis on such a massive scale?
It's overwhelmingly driven by conflict. Years of prolonged, brutal fighting involving numerous armed groups, but particularly the resurgence of the M23 rebel group in North Kivu province.
And the fighting leads to displacement.
Massive displacement. Millions of people have been forced to flee their homes, their villages, their farms, often multiple times. When people are displaced on that scale, they lose everything. Their crops, their livestock, their tools, their ability to earn any income. They become completely reliant on aid.
And is the international aid response able to cope?
Tragically, no. It's falling far short. The UN World Food Program, the WFP, which is the primary agency fighting hunger there, has had to significantly reduce its assistance capacity.
Reduce.
Due to critical funding shortages. Global humanitarian funding is stretched incredibly thin across multiple crises worldwide. So the WFP and the DRC reported they were forced to cut the number of people they could help, dropping from a target of 1 million people down to only about 600,000.
Meaning 400,000 desperate people lost their food aid.
Essentially, yes. Their rations were cut or eliminated entirely. This has immediate life-threatening consequences.
What's the situation like for those displaced people now?
The WFP is warning of catastrophe. They say displaced families have depleted all local resources, they've sold everything they own, road access to many areas is blocked by the ongoing conflict and general insecurity. People are literally dying from hunger and related diseases.
Is there any way to get aid in?
The WFP has made an urgent plea for the establishment of humanitarian air corridors, basically, using aircraft to fly aid directly into these otherwise inaccessible areas.
That sounds like an extreme measure.
It is. Requesting air corridors usually signals an absolute emergency, meaning conventional aid delivery routes via road have completely failed. It underscores just how desperate the situation has become in eastern DRC.
Okay, let's pivot now to issues of law, justice, and accountability. Starting with the ongoing fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, which continues to draw in prominent names. Prince Andrew.
Yes, the connection between Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, and the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein remains under scrutiny, particularly in the United States.
What's the latest development?
A panel of U.S. congressional Democrats formally requested that Prince Andrew appear before them for questioning regarding his relationship and connections with Epstein.
A congressional request. Does that mean he has to appear? Can they compel him?
That's the important context here. This specific committee does not have the legal authority to issue subpoenas to foreign nationals like Prince Andrew, especially since he's not currently accused of any crime himself in the U.S. So his appearance would be entirely voluntary.
So it's more of a political or public pressure move.
You could certainly see it that way. The request itself, even without subpoena power, keeps the issue in the headlines. It highlights the continued intense political and public scrutiny surrounding his past association with Epstein. Regardless of his official status, he stepped back from royal duties some time ago. The pressure remains high.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in the United Kingdom, there seems to be significant concern, even anger at the highest levels, about failures within the justice system itself.
That's right. The UK Prime Minister publicly expressed what was described as personal anger and frustration over a series of recent errors that led to the mistaken release of several prisoners from custody.
Mistakenly released. How does that happen?
The details are still emerging, but it points toward potential systemic failures, issues with paperwork, data entry, communication between agencies, possibly misinterpretation of sentences or release dates.
Have it all been recaptured?
Some have been returned to custody. But the most urgent and high-profile case involves a man named Brahim Kadour Cherif, identified as an Algerian national convicted of serious sex offenses. He was mistakenly released and, as of the latest reports, remains at large.
A convicted sex offender, mistakenly released and now missing. That's alarming.
Extremely alarming. It sparked a major police manhunt and raised profound questions about the oversight, the procedures, and the basic safeguards within the UK prison and probation system, particularly concerning the release protocols for potentially dangerous offenders. It's a significant public safety failure that has understandably shaken confidence in the Ministry of Justice.
And still in the UK, another major finding regarding policing itself. A significant independent review into London's Metropolitan Police Service.
Yes, this was a major, long-awaited review, and its findings are stark. Devastating, really.
What did it conclude?
The review, led by Baroness Louise Casey, concluded explicitly that anti-Black racism is systematically baked into the Metropolitan Police Force.
Baked into the system, meaning it's not just isolated incidents.
Exactly. The report argues it's institutional. It affects core policing practices, pointing specifically to the disproportionate use of things like stop-and-search powers against Black Londoners compared to white Londoners.
And it affects officers within the force, too.
Yes. The review also highlighted significant failures in how Black officers are treated, recruited, promoted, and retained within the Met itself. It found evidence of ingrained institutional biases that disadvantage Black officers and staff.
What was the recommendation?
The report calls for urgent, fundamental, and top-to-bottom reforms across the entire organization. The goal is to dismantle these systemic biases, rebuild trust with London's Black communities, which the report says is severely damaged, and create a service that is truly anti-racist in its culture and practices. It's a huge challenge for the Met's leadership.
Okay, finally today, let's touch on three quite specific but socially critical issues related to public safety and welfare, starting in the U.S., with the conclusion of that very difficult case involving the teacher shot at Rich Neck Elementary School.
Yes, this was the deeply disturbing case where a first-grade teacher in Newport News, Virginia, was shot and seriously wounded in her classroom by one of her own students, a 6-year-old boy.
And there was a legal case, a lawsuit.
The teacher sued the local school board. And recently, a jury returned a verdict awarding her significant compensation. Reports mentioned $40 million, though that could be subject to caps or appeals.
what was the basis for the lawsuit? It wasn't just about the tragic shooting itself, right?
No, the core of the case wasn't just the act itself, but alleged negligence by the school administration before the shooting happened.
Negligence how?
The trial focused heavily on evidence presented by the teacher's lawyers, suggesting that school administrators had received multiple explicit warnings from staff, including the teacher herself, on the day of the shooting. Warnings that the boy might have had a gun at school and that he was exhibiting threatening behavior.
And the claim was that the administration failed to act adequately on those warnings.
That was the central argument that the jury appears to have accepted. That despite these clear red flags, effective action wasn't taken to intervene, search the student, or secure the situation before the teacher was shot.
So this verdict is less about the child's actions and much more about administrative accountability for allegedly ignoring clear warning signs.
Exactly. It forces incredibly difficult questions about where the line of responsibility lies when potential threats are reported in a school environment, especially involving very young children. What is the duty of care for administrators?
And the verdict sends a message.
It sends a very clear and potentially very costly message that systemic failure to act on credible reported threats within a school system carries significant legal and financial consequences. It puts a sharp focus on school safety protocols and administrative liability.
Next, also in the U.S., an issue concerning basic welfare. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP benefits. Food stamps.
Right. There was a significant court ruling related to SNAP funding during a period when the U.S. federal government was experiencing a shutdown or partial shutdown.
What happened?
A federal judge issued an order compelling the Trump administration, which was in power at the time of this particular shutdown event referenced in the source, to ensure the full funding and distribution of SNAP benefits for the month of November.
Why was that necessary? Was the shutdown threatening the payments?
Government shutdowns often create complex funding issues for federal programs. There were concerns that the usual appropriations process was disrupted, potentially delaying or reducing the crucial food assistance that millions of Americans rely on.
Yeah, SNAP is critical for many households.
Absolutely vital. It's one of the primary safety nets preventing widespread hunger and food insecurity in the United States. The judge's order essentially underscored the non-negotiable importance of this program.
It highlighted that even during political deadlocks and government funding gaps, this essential aid needed to continue flowing.
Precisely. The ruling emphasized that the administrative and political issues causing the shutdown could not be allowed to interrupt the delivery of vital food assistance to vulnerable populations who depend on it for their basic survival. It was a legal affirmation of the program's critical role.
And lastly today, a really unusual, but apparently quite serious, workplace safety issue emerging from the North Sea oil and gas industry.
Yeah, this one is quite specific, but affects a significant number of workers in that sector. It's about weight limits.
Weight limits? For what?
For the workers themselves. Reports indicate that thousands of offshore oil and gas workers in the North Sea region, which involves countries like the UK, Norway, etc., are facing an ultimatum from their employers.
Which is?
Lose weight, or potentially lose their jobs.
Seriously, why?
It comes down to the physics and safety regulations surrounding helicopter transport, which is the primary way workers get to and from these remote offshore platforms. Specifically, it relates to the weight limits of the helicopter winch systems used for emergency rescues, and sometimes for routine transfers directly onto installations.
The winches can't lift heavier workers.
There's a maximum operational weight limit for the winch, dictated by engineering and safety standards. The problem is, when you add the worker's body weight plus the weight of mandatory survival gear, like immersion suits, life vests, helmets, the total combined weight for larger workers is increasingly exceeding these strict safety limits.
So if there were an emergency requiring a winch rescue, they might not be able to lift certain workers safely.
That's the core safety concern the companies are citing. They argue they have a legal and ethical duty to ensure all personnel can be safely rescued or transported within the operational limits of the equipment.
But telling thousands of workers to lose weight or face dismissal, that sounds like a really complex employment issue.
It absolutely is. It raises difficult questions about workplace health standards versus potential discrimination, about employee rights, about the responsibility of companies to maybe invest in higher capacity equipment versus placing the burden on the individual worker. It's a unique safety challenge where physical limits directly impact job security in a very demanding industry.
Wow. Okay, that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. And what a range we've covered. I mean, from the absolute most fundamental forces of the cosmos, why matter exists, down to the very specific weight limit of a winch trying to rescue a worker in the North Sea.
It really does show the incredible scale of things happening, doesn't it? And the interconnectivity is just remarkable when you lay it all out.
Yeah, think about it. The intense global demand for high-end AI chips, driven by that $1.4 trillion infrastructure ambition we talked about.
Right.
That translates directly, almost immediately, into a surge in memory chip prices in a wholesale market in Shenzhen, China.
Which then directly impacts the price of the phone or laptop that you, listening right now, might be thinking of buying. It's not abstract.
Absolutely. And similarly, you see how high-level geopolitical maneuvering, the decisions of sovereign leaders, the political climate in major nations.
It directly dictates how critical global initiatives like climate action funding through the TFFF actually get off the ground or stall.
And that actually leads perfectly into our final provocative thought for you today. Let's circle back to that Tropical Forest Forever facility, the TFFF.
Okay.
On the surface, it sounds brilliant, right? A massive collective act of global altruism. We heard about the big pledges from countries like Norway, Brazil, Indonesia.
A potential game changer for rainforest protection.
But let's revisit that crucial condition Norway attached to its $3 billion pledge. Remember, the TFFF needs $25 billion in total public funding to really get going.
And Norway's money is conditional.
Exactly. It hinges on at least $9.8 billion being raised from other donor nations by the year 2026. It's a couple of years away now.
It puts the pressure on everyone else.
It does. So here's the question we want to leave you with, something to mull over. When global survival initiatives, things potentially critical for the planet like protecting rainforests, hinge on this kind of conditional collective altruism, where wealthy nations like Norway essentially put an expiration date on their commitment, basing it on whether others step up first.
Does that structure genuinely reward and incentivize true, urgent commitment from everyone?
Or does it perhaps inadvertently create a convenient loophole, a way for wealthy nations to sort of wait and see, to hedge their bets, watch if others contribute first, thereby mitigating their own financial risk while global deadlines tick closer?
Is it a catalyst for action or a built-in excuse for delay?
Food for thought.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it gave you some valuable perspective.
We'll see you next time.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.